How God changes your brain.
Is your brain. What if your brain actually changes when you pray? Not metaphorically, not even emotionally, but physically. Scientists have put people inside brain scanners while they prayed, while they were meditating, and experienced what they describe as a connection with God. And what they saw was very fascinating. But here is where it gets even more interesting. They were not trying to prove that God exists. They were trying to answer a completely different question. What happens inside the human brain when a person reaches toward God? And the answer may make you look at prayer differently forever. In 2009, neuroscientist Andrew Newberg and therapist Mark Robert Waldman published How God Changes Your Brain. They were drawing on brain imaging research, surveys of spiritual experiences, and studies of how people perceive God. Their research included people engaged in different forms of spiritual practice, including Franciscan nuns praying and Buddhist practitioners meditating. And when researchers looked at their brains, the brain was not simply sitting there doing nothing. Different regions or parts of the brain became more active. The areas involved in attention and concentration showed increased activities during meditation and prayer, and areas involved in our sense of orientation and boundaries between ourselves and the outside world showed reduced activities during some spiritual experiences. Think about that. The person is sitting still. Their eyes may be closed, their body may barely be moving, but inside their brain it is changing. And this leads to an even bigger question. Could the way you think about God actually affect the way your brain responds? According to Newberg and Waldman's work, the answer appears to be yes. Their research suggests that contemplating a loving God rather than a punitive or threatening image of God is associated with lower anxiety than depression and greater feelings of security, compassion, and love. So your picture of God matters. If you constantly imagine God as angry, you may live with fear. If you imagine God as distant, you may feel abandoned. But when you meditate on God as loving, compassionate, and present, your emotional response can be very different. And that's where the story becomes deeply personal. Because perhaps the question is not only do you believe in God? Perhaps another question is, what God do you believe in? Because what you repeatedly focus on can shape the way you think, feel, and respond. And there is another fascinating part of their work. They explored how people perceive God by asking adults to draw what God looks like. The drawings were remarkably different. Some people imagine God as a person, others imagine light, energy, a presence or something beyond physical form. But why does that matter? Because the God you imagine is not merely an idea sitting somewhere in your head. Your beliefs can influence your emotions, your behavior, and the way you interpret the world around you. But now let's slow down for a moment. Because there is an important distinction. Science can observe changes in the brain during prayer. It can observe pattern of brain activity. It can study stress, attention, emotion, and behavior. But science cannot put God inside a scanner. A brain scan can show us what is happening in the brain during someone's experience of God, but it cannot prove or disprove God himself. And that's the distinctions. And that distinctions matters. Because Christianity was never built on the claim that a brain scanner would prove God exists. Faith goes further than what an instrument can measure. And yet, isn't it fascinating that the human brain appears capable of profound spiritual experience? We seek meaning, we seek purpose, we seek connection, we even seek something greater than ourselves. And scripture says, be transformed by renewing of your mind. Romans 12 verse 2. I want you to notice the language, renewing your mind. Not simply changing your circumstances, not changing your environment, changing your mind. Because God doesn't only want to change what is around you, He wants to transform what is happening within you. Your thought, your attitude, your fears, your desires, including your responses, your understanding of who you are. And perhaps this is why prayer is more than asking God for things. Sometimes prayer is also allowing God to change you. When you pray, you need to slow down. You focus, you surrender, you turn your attention away from fear and towards God. And when that becomes a pattern, something begins to happen. Your thoughts can change, your emotional responses can change, your priorities itself can change, your behavior will change, and eventually your life can change. Science indeed can study the brain. It can measure activities, it can also observe patterns. But faith asks deeper questions. Who are you becoming? Because the greatest miracle may not be that your prayer changes what happens around you. No, it may be that prayer changes who you are while you are waiting for what happens around you. So the next time you pray, don't think of it as simply talking into the air. I want you to pause, be still, focus your mind on God, and remember, be transformed by renewing of your mind. Maybe God doesn't just want to change your situation. Maybe He wants to change the mind you face that situation with. And perhaps that's where the transformation begins. If this message spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, your circumstances may shape your day, but what you allow to shape your mind can shape your life. Stay blessed.